Welcome everyone to the 2021 It's On Us National Student Leadership Summit. We're very, very happy to have you here. And more than anything, I'm extremely happy to introduce Shira to talk about Survivor Support 101 today. Sorry about the traffic behind me. Shira, you can take it away.
Great, thank you so much. Hello everyone, my name is Shira Freiman. I will be presenting the It's On Us webinar, Survivor Support 101. Thank you all for being here. Go ahead and get started. If you could hit the next slide for me. So this is just kind of an agenda, just to kind of tell you what we're going to be going over today. So we'll start by myself giving you an introduction. We'll have a little overview of It's On Us as an entity, a general overview of the educational material and focus areas of It's On Us. Then we'll kind of get into the Survivor Support 101 workshop training. And then I will take any questions. And just so you know, for transparency, this is being recorded and it will be posted later to It's On Us's YouTube. So feel free to keep your cameras off if you want to ensure that your face is not shown. And also the chat will not be transcribed or posted to the website. So feel free to share anything either with myself or to the It's On Us account that just sent out a message in there, and we'll be able to get those answered for you. Next slide. So this is just a little bit about me. Like I said, my name is Shira Freiman. I'm currently a rising 2L, so a second-year law student at the Widener University, Delaware Law School. And I just wanted to give you kind of a little bit of background about my involvement with It's On Us and just some of the other things that I've been involved in over the years. So I went through a training to become a sexual assault counselor and victim advocate in the state of Pennsylvania. I also founded It's On Us at Temple University. So that's located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in the United States. And it is Temple University's chapter of the It's On Us campaign. I founded it when I was going into my sophomore year of college, and it's still active now today. Of course, it has different leaders taking it on. However, it's been really great to see how they've been able to keep that running and projecting that information to students. And then this year, I was the regional advisor for the Mid-Atlantic region. So I oversaw a variety of different schools in a variety of states throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a future slide. And next year, I'm going to be a domestic violence research and advocacy fellow at my law school's Family Health Law and Policy Institute. So I'm really excited about that. And then I just wanted to kind of, tell you a little bit more about me. So my inspiration is the one and only Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And then I did put a fun fact that I have a bumper sticker of her on my car, but kind of ironically, I had my car detailed like last week and they forgot to give me back my magnets, and I created this presentation before I got the magnet. So technically right now I don't have a bumper sticker of her on my car, but hopefully I'll be getting that back soon. Next slide. So then just kind of a little overview of It's On Us, just so that you all know, if you are aware, we can give you a little bit more information. And if this is perhaps your first event with It's On Us, so that you can kind of get a little bit of a background about what It's On Us is all about. Next slide. So It's On Us was started in 2014 under the Obama administration, and it was intended to bring as many students and campus community members into the conversation and raise awareness about sexual assault. And then to date, over 440,000 individuals have taken the It's On Us pledge to combat college sexual assault, and over 500 student chapters have held over 6,000 educational and organizing events in all 50 states and Washington, D.C. And when we say kind of, the It's On Us campaign against sexual assault, It's On Us is really more so of a program. It's really a call to action for individuals to become engaged in these conversations and to be, attending these kinds of trainings and seminars that all of you are at today, really to kind of garner as much support and awareness about these issues as possible. Next slide. So just a little bit about the pillars of It's On Us, which are also known as the focus areas, which are survivor support, which is what you all are attending now, a little presentation about. And the other two are bystander intervention and sexual assault awareness. So a analysis was conducted of different national programs and existing best practices that involved interviews and focus groups with students, staff, administrators, faculty members, et cetera, all across the country. And then It's on Us developed peer-to-peer resources that can address the existing needs identified, as well as creating a pilot program to test each of these resources. And they had kind of come to the conclusion that most of the programs included the components of the school response, bystander intervention, and community engagement. And the way that It's on Us felt would be the best way to kind of handle those different topics would be through survivor support, bystander intervention, and sexual assault awareness. So ever since It's on Us has been operating, those have been kind of the core focus areas. And then within those core areas, there have also been subtopics and subcategories that have been focused on as well. Next. So this is just a little bit about, if you could go back, I think you skipped one. Okay, never mind. So the role of an It's on Us regional advisor, again, that's what I am right now. So I oversee the Mid-Atlantic region. If anyone from Region 6 is here, that is who I oversaw this past year. So New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, Delaware, Maryland. So what I do is I kind of coordinate communications between the national organization as well as the student chapters and individual student leaders who are heading those organizations, and really educating them about the It's on Us pillars and really what's important to the national organization, and addressing kind of any questions, concerns, and also assisting with any ideas that they came up with. And I can also had been helping them with event planning. It was really difficult this past year, as all of the students that I was working with, as I'm sure most of you were as well, were fully remote this past year. And that was really not something that everyone was, really fully comfortable in yet. So it was really great to kind of be able to brainstorm with them and, work through some of the difficulties that come with operating fully remote, but really being able to kind of brainstorm and come up with ways that we could still disseminate the important information to students at their respective campuses. Next. So this is just a little bit about terminology, because the words that we use carry meaning, and it's really important to be conscious of this at all times. So for example, there's, often a big discussion about whether the proper term is to say a victim or a survivor. And it's really important to point out that in many, if not most situations, there is no proper term. As I kind of have indicated at the bottom, individuals may have preferences on terminology. So some individuals choose to identify as a victim, or they may choose to identify as a survivor. And some of the complications to that really come in when you're talking about the legal process, because even individuals who may choose to identify as a survivor as opposed to a victim, the legal system uses the word victim, so that can be really traumatizing and triggering for individuals who don't want to use that word to describe themselves. So that's just something to keep in mind. I think it's really important to kind of have the default to be survivor, because victim can carry a connotation that's negative for a lot of people. And if someone asks you to, refer as a victim instead of a survivor, I would urge you to honor that. And then some of the other terms we have, like, so sexual assault, sexual violence, sexual misconduct, sexual trauma. These are all different things that can be used to describe some of the same things. However, they can also have different connotations because, like I said, words carry really heavy meanings. So different words can mean different things. So just be conscious when you're speaking about what kind of, terms you're using. And again, if a survivor that you're speaking to, that you're supporting, prefers that you use another kind of term to describe something, I would really urge you to listen to them and validate what they're feeling. One of the biggest things that I've kind of run into, particularly in the media, is the use of the term non-consensual sex. This is absolutely not appropriate. There's no such thing as non-consensual sex. It's either consensual sex or it's sexual assault. And I think that that's something that's really important that I've kind of been working on to encourage people just to be aware of the words that they're using, because when we're kind of using that kind of language in our everyday vocabulary, we begin to normalize it. And particularly for individuals who don't necessarily put their heart and soul into this topic, to kind of be hearing things like that, it can implicitly start to impact the way that they think about sexual violence. And we absolutely just want to make people as aware of as possible as to the gravity of sexual violence. So to be referring to it as non-consensual sex is both improper and also can be really disturbing to the movement. Finally, I just wanted to talk about also unwanted pornography. That's also not really an appropriate term to be using because pornographic content is consensual. So to be saying unwanted pornography when you're actually talking about lewd sexual images that were taken of someone without their consent, it can be really harmful when you're referring to it as unwanted pornography, because it's not. Pornographic content is used for pleasure viewing, and it's quite disgusting to be referring to unconsensual lewd images of another person, to be kind of using it in that tone can really be really harmful and hurtful to people who are survivors of things like revenge lewd images being dispersed of them. So also just kind of being mindful of that as well. Next slide, please. So now we're going to kind of get into the Survivor Support 101 webinar training that is prepared by It's On Us. Next slide, please. So just a general breakdown of the contents. So we'll do kind of an introduction, what is survivor support, comprehensive support programs, fair and equitable disciplinary processes, how to support a friend, and then I will make time for questions from you all as well. Next, please. So we'll begin with kind of an introduction about what is survivor support. Next, please. So just as some kind of background information, it's estimated that around 90% of sexual assault survivors do not report the violence that they've experienced. That can mean either to a law enforcement agency or to anyone at all. I think there's kind of different, understandings and reasons as to why this may be. But I think oftentimes people don't recognize that what happened to them would be considered as sexual violence because we kind of live in a society and a culture where these things are so normalized. So it's really important to be having these kinds of conversations so that we can denormalize it and really, ask the tough questions and give the difficult answers so that we can really combat these issues. And just to make a point, marginalized communities in particular face significant obstacles in obtaining necessary medical care or accessing the legal system. Different factors like race, language barriers, disability, class and gender identity often exacerbate the institutional failure in response to sexual violence. And this is something that It's On Us is really passionate about. It's, the numbers really do show that individuals who identify with marginalized populations are often not only sexually assaulted at higher rates, but they also may have less access to those resources. So that's really one of the core values of It's On Us, is making sure that everyone, regardless of their background or experience, has equal access to not only the same resources, but resources that are going to be beneficial to them. Some individuals may feel more comfortable going to different centers or reaching out to different resources that have true experience in the background that they come from. So that can be one of the most beneficial and validating things for survivors. Next, please. So survivor support is the specific response provided to victims or survivors of sexual violence by a campus community. So what does comprehensive support kind of look like? So we're going to talk a little bit more later on in this presentation about what's called a CCRT, also known as a Coordinated Community Response Team. It also includes survivor-centered victim services and advocacy, trauma-informed and effective law enforcement response, and a fair, equitable disciplinary process. And even if you have all of these kind of things, you need to have a variety, and there also needs to be a really great quality to these available support systems, because without quality support, there really is no support for survivors. So that's also something important to keep in mind. Next, please. Okay. So survivor-centered victim services and advocacy. So this can be a little bit tricky because, I think it's one of those hot topic words to be talking about survivor-centered when we're talking in this space, but it's really important to kind of define what that means. So that is something that's accessible for all victims and survivors. That means that it'll be intersectional, like I was kind of referring to earlier, respecting the different backgrounds and experiences that people come from. And also understanding that the experiences of each survivor is different. Oftentimes, we may hear, people talking about they didn't act the way that I would assume that a survivor would speak, or that someone recovering would act. And it's really important that we, really break that down and again, recognize that every person's experience is different, and the way that people respond to trauma, whether explicitly or implicitly, or being subconscious, is going to be vastly different. And it's really important to recognize and honor that. And interventions that prioritize the needs of the survivor are really survivor-centered, as opposed to, and in a situation that's kind of furthering the mission of the organization, or focusing on, the support system of survivors instead of actually prioritizing the needs of the survivors as well. It's really important, of course, to always be mindful of the individuals that are helping a survivor through a situation. But at the end of the day, if you want to have survivor-centered victim services, you need to have the survivor at the center and the core of everything that you do. And also comprehensive services that reflect an understanding of the impact of trauma, as it can manifest itself in a variety of different areas of an individual's life. So it's really important to address the core root problem to be able to kind of deconstruct any existing problems as well. And also it needs to be culturally relevant as well. Next, please. So a CCRT that I was speaking to a little bit in the previous slide is a multifaceted, coordinated effort to accomplish unified goals that engages key stakeholders from the surrounding community and throughout the campus, including students, faculty, staff, and administrators. So what does that mean? It's really kind of a central way for a community to put together a response team that is really working together with the same common goal of supporting survivors and preventing sexual misconduct on campus. So that'll include a variety of individuals. It can't be done by one person. There really needs to be a backing both by the institution itself as well as the community, because communities are what make them up. So it's really important that, everyone is involved in the process. Next slide. So a successful CCRT will do a variety of things, including promoting safe campuses, providing trauma-informed services and support for survivors, promoting campus and community education, collaboration, strengthening student knowledge, making individuals aware of the resources that are available to them, including campus climate surveys, and fostering coalitions and networks. So you may be asking yourself as a student leader, who should be your community partners? There are so many resources and organizations that may be available to you, and it can kind of be hard to narrow it down and identify the ones that'll be most beneficial to you. So It's on Us really suggests that any organization in your local community that your institution has either a formal or informal relationship with can be on your CCRT. So we kind of suggest starting with a Title IX office, or if there's like a student conduct or community standards office as well. They can be great resources to start with because they should kind of have accessibility and knowledge as to other resources that would be beneficial to you, that have, like-minded goals in mind. So those would be kind of a great place to start. You can also check if your university's website, if they have a sexual misconduct policy. They may have an available resources page as well on there that you can kind of check out and reach out to different resources. And I think one of the best ways to identify great community partners is to find, one great resource and then just kind of ask them, who is it that you oftentimes partner with? Who do you find to be the most beneficial to you? Who do you kind of direct the most amount of students to? Because those well-established resources will be a fantastic resource for you as well. And something that's been really important recently has been individuals kind of reaching out to different like bars or restaurants that are located either on or right outside of their college campus. You can have really discussions with them and talk about what kind of policies and protocols they have in place. See if they have things like security cameras. Really just like fostering a positive relationship with them as well can be really effective. Next slide, please. So I kind of already talked a little bit about some of these, but some of the example partners that you can reach out to are if your campus has an LGBTQIA+ center, the Office of the Registrar, if they're local rape crisis centers, domestic violence shelters, or other survivor response groups, different advocates. So it's important, I've kind of talked a little bit about different organizations that you can partner up with. However, if there are specific individuals who you know of that are really knowledgeable on your campus, whether it be specific students, a faculty member who's really outspoken about these kinds of issues, you can reach out to them as well. Like I said kind of earlier, it doesn't really need to be the most formal thing, but the more people you have involved to kind of reach that end goal, the better it will be for everyone. Next slide. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the fair and equitable disciplinary processes. So one of the first models that we have is called the single investigator model. The process, kind of as the name goes, involves the use of a single investigator as opposed to multiple, or as opposed to some of the other models I'll talk about in a moment. But it's oftentimes seen as more confidential and less traumatizing because both parties only kind of have to go through the incident once. The investigators kind of, can build trust with the parties because they're working one-on-one with each party, and there's kind of the ability to train small groups for investigations. If there is the use of an external investigator as opposed to someone who's within the university, there can be it can really alleviate some of the conflicts that exist from using an internal investigator. But the process outcome really can be reliant on the quality and training of that specific investigator, which is why it's so important that we have comprehensive and cohesive training for those investigators. So depending on who the investigator is at your specific university, if your school uses a single investigator model, the outcome can kind of be reliant on how well trained that individual is and if they're trauma informed. So that's just one thing to keep in mind. And if it is conducted by one person, the process can become extremely lengthy if there's different evidence and information that the individual has to look into. Next slide. So one of the next models is the hearing board model, and this is oftentimes what you may see in colleges and universities. And individuals may be empowered by their experiences to be had at a hearing and being able to share those with a group of individuals who's listening to them and is really, working to hopefully come to the best outcome. And schools may have the capacity to train volunteer employees and students on a hearing board as opposed to investigators who are already trained. So that's one of the biggest differences in that it's either the school or if there's an external entity that's hired to kind of handle the training, you can kind of shape how you want the individuals to respond, as opposed to if you have an external investigator coming in, then they may already have that training kind of buckled down, and it may be reliant on what they already have learned. So this is one of the positive things that can come from the hearing board model. One of the possible cons is that board members with influence may control board deliberations, and that's something that, can be extremely toxic and dangerous because at the end of the day, the best result for the parties should be what's at the core focus. And if that, kind of becomes muddled in the pursuit of other things, that can be extremely dangerous. Additionally, diversity on the board can be a problem if you're pulling directly from a board of trustees or another kind of entity where there's often a lack of diversity, particularly at predominantly white institutions. That can be really disheartening for individuals who don't identify as white folks to try and reconcile with these issues and try to explain them to individuals who may not understand the experiences and backgrounds that they come from. And one other thing is that For domestic, dating violence, and stalking cases, boards can actually be more dangerous because they can provide more opportunities for the parties to be in the same room for longer periods of time. And it's really unfortunate. And if this becomes a concern for either yourself or someone that you care about that you're helping through a situation, that's absolutely something that you should, be conscious of and address to the Title IX coordinator or anyone who's kind of in charge of handling situations like that so that they can ensure the safety of all people involved. Next slide. So next we have a hybrid model. And this is a single investigator who comes up with a report and deliberative board, and then they review the report and determine responsibility and any sanctions that will be imposed. A well-trained investigator can get into the details of a case, which allow the board more opportunity to focus on factual inconsistencies and make a determination, and really allows for checks and balances on the investigation without individuals having to repeat every single detail of the incident again, because that can be extremely re-traumatizing, particularly if individuals have kind of lawyers representing themselves, representing the parties. Lawyers are really trained to locate minor inconsistencies, and they have a way where they can kind of take those small inconsistencies that aren't factually incorrect. They're just simply, you may recall something, you saw someone holding up 5 fingers, but they were really holding up 4. Something that is not, going to be groundbreaking, but lawyers are kind of trained to identify those, and then they can make them into something bigger than they actually are. So kind of using that hybrid model allows for checks and balances to ensure that things like that don't become dispositive. Next slide. And one of the more new models is called the restorative justice model. And it can really look different in every situation, but it focuses on assessing harm caused and identifying different ways that it can be addressed. This is usually pretty survivor-centered and kind of allows facilitation of dialogue or conversations between the parties. And then an investigation of students who have been found responsible for gender-based misconduct in violations at their institution or are transferring to a new institution. One of the kind of cons with this model is that it may conflict with different Title IX requirements that are imposed, that investigations be prompt, and Title IX guidance discouraging mediation between victims and offenders. There are oftentimes a lot of laws in place that kind of ensure the compliance of universities with different policies for sexual harassment and sexual violence. So the introduction of the restorative justice model in schools is oftentimes kind of at odds with the legal compliancy that they have to follow. So it can sometimes be used in addition to whatever model is determined, usually the hybrid model, to kind of address these situations. But it's particularly very useful for outside of the school setting. Next slide. So how to support a friend. An estimated 20 to 25% of undergraduate individuals who identify as women are survivors of sexual violence. And 40% of the time, a survivor will disclose to a friend or a peer before they report to anyone else. Therefore, it's extremely important to know that a survivor's first experience of disclosure is supportive. And, it's often hard to know what to say. So we kind of have some ideas on the next slide. So these are, of course, you don't want to sound robotic, but these are just some of the things that you can either think about, how you would kind of turn this into the verbiage that you use with your friends and your peers, and, kind of make it sound as though it's coming from you. But some of the most important things are just, I believe you. Because so often individuals may feel, I don't know if this really happened, how I'm remembering it. Like, I don't know. I've heard so many, great things about this individual, and it can be so validating just to have someone say that they believe you, particularly in a society that kind of forces you into silence and to feel as though you're not believed. That can really be one of the most impactful things. And asking them what they need, as opposed to just assuming, saying, would you like me to give you advice, or do you want me to just be an ear to listen to? For me, has been one of the most beneficial things, because sometimes people don't want unwarranted advice or even warranted advice. They might just want a shoulder to cry on or an individual to kind of listen to them because they don't feel heard elsewhere. So just kind of asking them what it is that they need from you or what it is that they want from you. And one of the most important things is asking them if they need immediate medical attention and if they would like you to call the police or your local rape crisis center. Do not do that without getting their permission. It's really important for individuals who have been victimized to really reclaim what happened to them, and because the power was taken away from them during an assault. And if you're kind of going out of your way to contact the police or a rape crisis center without their consent or even without their knowledge, can be just further traumatizing, and that's not at all what you want to do. So providing them, the opportunity for resources and pointing them to individuals that they can reach out to if they'd like to. But I really urge you not to reach out to individuals without their knowledge or consent. Things like you're not alone. I support you. I support your decision, whether you choose to come forward to law enforcement or another entity, or if I'm the only individual that you choose to come forward to. Making sure that an individual knows that no matter what it is that you choose to do, you really support them, because this is their experience and you don't want to take anything further away from them. And then the next one I already talked about a little bit, but making sure that the individual knows that, you're not, if you're providing resources, you don't want to sound robotic. You want to kind of explain, I want to be as helpful as I possibly can, and I want to help direct you to the proper resources, because, I'm your friend. I'm not necessarily fully trained in all of these things. I don't understand the intricacies of it. So I can be, kind of an individual who can go with you to these if you decide to report. If that's something that you feel comfortable with as a friend, you can always suggest that. If they don't want you in the room, you can say, how about I drive you over there and we don't have to speak a word in the car. We can just both sit in silence. I will go and I will wait outside for you, and I'll be here to pick you up. And if you don't want to talk about it, I won't ask any questions. If you do want to talk about it, I'll wait for you to bring it up. Really just kind of, so to speak, putting the ball in their court, kind of allowing them to be the ones who can come forth and speak with more information if they want to, but making sure that they don't feel pressured. And one of the most crucial things too is just saying, thank you for trusting me enough to tell me this. Survivors really may not want to share their experience. So to have an individual kind of come to you and trust you with that information is frankly an honor. It shows that they really have that trust in you and they feel comfortable sharing that with you. So don't betray that trust by kind of, going around and speaking to other people about it. If it becomes a public case and people start asking you questions, just say, I don't know, or I'm not at liberty to discuss this. Really just honor the boundaries that are implicitly set in that when someone comes and shares with you something really intimate and personal like this, that you shouldn't share that with others. Next. So just a couple things not to do. So give unwarranted advice, or even just any advice. If someone, says, I'm thinking about doing this. However, if an individual kind of says, no, you shouldn't be doing that, you should be doing X, insert, any information. Again, that can, be really taking away the power from that individual. And then don't ask questions, especially why questions, why were you wearing X? Why were you doing X? You can insert a bazillion things into there, because then you're kind of forcing an individual who's been victimized to rationalize something that can't be rationalized. So just, it's not right to put someone in that position where you're kind of putting them on the spot when they're trying to share with you what happened to them. You don't want to be kind of just asking all of these questions and putting them in a space where they're going to feel even more uncomfortable. And don't start talking negatively about the perpetrator. That again can be really triggering for someone, whether it's you're saying positive things that you've heard or negative things that you've heard. Then the focus kind of becomes on the perpetrator as opposed to getting the survivor the support that they need. And then also, like I said earlier, don't ever share someone's story with others without their explicit permission. And that really kind of goes to even if that individual has chosen to come public with their story. And if you're, known as a best friend of that individual, or you've been in class with them and they've said things in class, it should kind of go without saying that all people, whether they choose to come publicly forward with their situation or not, should kind of be given that voice where they can share their situation publicly or personally. So that's also something just to keep in mind. Next, please. So if you are a mandated reporter, and if any of you work for universities, usually on a volunteer basis, you would not be considered a mandated reporter. But more oftentimes than not, if you're receiving a paycheck from your university as a resident assistant, as a student office worker, if you work in your Title IX office, you would be considered a mandated reporter. And if you're not sure whether or not you are, I would suggest either if you have like a contract, looking through that, or just reaching out to your manager to kind of identify whether you are or are not. And if you're a mandated reporter, that can mean kind of different things for different universities. But I know that, for example, where I attended at Temple in Philadelphia, if you were a mandated reporter, you then had to if someone alleged to you that they had been sexually assaulted, you would have to go to the Title IX coordinator and make a report, give the name and any information that you were kind of given by the survivor to the Title IX coordinator. And then the Title IX coordinator would have to, they would, I think, assign like a number as opposed to including the name of the person, but they would have to reach out to campus police and just say, an instance of sexual violence was committed on campus or off campus to be in compliance with the Clery Act. And then the Title IX coordinator would reach out specifically to that individual who had been sexually assaulted and provide them resources and the opportunity if they wanted to come forward to law enforcement, but they didn't have to. So it's just something to keep in mind. Like I said earlier, a mandated reporter can kind of have a little bit of a differing definition depending on the university that you attend. So it's important to make sure that you're getting the proper definition and following the proper protocol on your specific institution. If you have any questions about that, I can certainly help locate who the proper entity would be to reach out to on your university campus. And if you are a mandated reporter, as soon as you're able to, if you can kind of tell that someone seems to be, going in the direction that they may share with you that they're a survivor or their friend is a survivor, just kind of let that person talking to you know that you are there to listen, but that you are a mandated reporter. So we have here kind of an example of something that you can say. So I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I did want to let you know that I am a mandated reporter on campus. Before you share any further with me, if you're no longer comfortable talking to me, I can connect you to confidential resources such as our survivor advocates and health services. And that's just a really easy way that you can kind of just insert to make people aware. Like I said earlier, this is all about ensuring that individuals who are survivors feel as in control of their recovery as possible. So just kind of letting someone know as opposed to having them, speak their truth and then you after the fact saying, oh, by the way, I'm a mandated reporter, I have to go report you to Title IX, can be really invalidating for an individual and make them really uncomfortable. So just being as transparent as possible, and that kind of gives the opportunity where if they don't want to be reported to the Title IX office, that you can kind of direct them to different confidential resources, whether it be if there's some kind of counseling on campus that specifically tailors to sexual violence survivors or the like, then that's kind of a way that you can point them to confidential resources if they'd be more comfortable that way. Next, please. All right, so next we're going to talk a little bit about self-care on the next slide. So it's just really important to remember when it comes to self-care, you can't best support others if you aren't supporting yourself. And it's really important to be mindful of vicarious or secondary trauma and be practicing self-care so that you can be the most effective resource and ally, as well as just the most effective person. It can be really difficult when you're in these spaces to always be constantly supporting individuals and you kind of put yourself on the back burner and forget to support yourself, which is just as important as helping others. And especially for those of us who are attending now that, really want to be involved with this movement and help as many people as possible. It really burns you out if you're not kind of focusing also on yourself at some points and just knowing that it's okay to put yourself first in situations and really just be taking care of yourself so that you can continue to do the fantastic work that I know you all are doing. Next slide. So what is self-care? It's going to look different for everyone. the act of doing an activity that you personally enjoy in order to preserve your mind and body. So some examples may be taking a bath, taking a walk, petting your dog, reading a book. For everyone, they're going to look super different. I know for me, it's taking a nap. It can be the middle of the day. I might just, be like, my body is telling me that I need a nap, and I'm going to honor that. Of course, sometimes it might not be the appropriate time, so I might do something instead of taking a nap, like petting my dog, or even just walking outside and just looking at the sun and closing my eyes for a moment and just grounding myself. For me, those can be some of the most effective things. And, taking a step outside can take 30, 45 seconds. It doesn't need to be a long thing, but I can make it longer if I want to. But really just honoring what it is that my body is telling me that it needs in that moment. And it's especially important to remember to fit into self-care into our schedules. So not waiting until you're kind of almost at your breaking point and you just are like, okay, I need to get outside right now. But really kind of taking 2 or 3 times throughout the day, whether I'm feeling good or I'm not feeling good, and just being conscious of, taking that moment to really respect my body and just ground myself has been one of the most effective things for me. And exposure to trauma and disclosures of sexual violence can lead to vicarious trauma or secondary trauma, which is trauma-related stress reactions and symptoms that result from exposure to another individual's traumatic experiences rather than from direct exposure to a traumatic event. So that's something that's kind of often neglected in our community, is that, we kind of will hear all of these stories and really be helping our friends, our peers, our family members through these really difficult situations. And we forget to kind of take care of ourselves. So that's why it's so important to be engaging in a routine of self-care, because you can hopefully mitigate the impact that vicarious trauma can cause. Next, please. So here are just a couple of tips to develop a routine. Think about what it is that you enjoy doing. Schedule a time to do it each day, week, even an hour. If you're, sitting and studying for 3-4 hours at a time, make sure that you're really being conscious of taking breaks. And even if it's just, to stretch your legs for 5 seconds and then get back to work, just the consciousness of getting yourself in a routine can be some of the most effective parts of it. And spend time with people in your life that make you feel happy. Also, a little asterisk, they don't have to be people. If you have, a pet hamster, a fish, a friend, a dog, anything in your life that it is that makes you feel happy, spend time with it. And sometimes that can just be yourself curling up and reading a book or watching TV, or just closing your bedroom door, laying on your bed and doing absolutely nothing. For some people, that would be considered self-care. I know for myself, that definitely would be. And also recognizing that it's okay to say no. You don't always have to be the person who's saying yes to kind of every situation that's presented to them. One of the most important things can be if an individual kind of is like, are you kind of in a space where I can share something difficult with you? And it can be hard sometimes to say no, but you can kind of say, hey, I really want to be there for you. I'm not really in a great mental space right now. How about I take a lap around the neighborhood and then we can reconvene? Something like that. You want to, of course, be supportive of your friend and respect what it is that they need in that moment, but you also need to put yourself first and recognize that you also need to be in a positive space as well. And then just think about why it is that you're doing the self-care activity. Because once you kind of think about why, eventually you'll kind of get to a point where you're just like, it's just muscle memory at this point. I'm doing it because I care about myself and I'm doing it because I want to, not because I'm doing it as though I feel I need to. And once you kind of develop a routine for yourself, then you really kind of fall into that. Next slide. So that kind of wraps up everything that I had prepared for you all. If you have any questions, I'm not sure if any were sent through in the chat. If so, I can absolutely take those, or if you'd like to raise your hand, I can call on you and then you can unmute. Are there any questions? I know a question did come in from Amanda asking if there will be a recording. And the response is yes, absolutely. The recording will be posted to the YouTube for all of you to reference. If you have any questions about anything that I had spoken about that you come up with, if you're rewatching it or if you're thinking about it later this evening. I believe Adriana put her email in the chat. If not, if you wouldn't mind dropping that in there if anyone has any questions that they don't feel comfortable asking in front of the group. But that is all I have prepared for you all. I'll hang out until 4 o'clock, so for the next 10 minutes. If you don't feel comfortable asking a question in front of the group, if you want to speak to me individually or send me a private message, I'm more than happy to respond to that. But thank you all so much for coming and listening to all of what I had to say. I really appreciate it. I wish you all the best of luck, and thank you so much for your participation with It's on Us.